Hello, and welcome to the Doc Exchange, a Real Stories podcast, in partnership with the Grierson Trust. Every week, I'll ask a new filmmaker or filmmaking team about 3 documentaries, connected by a single theme, that have made a meaningful impression on their work and life.
One more. 3, 2, 1. Immediately afterwards, a heavy dust. 3, 2, 1. Immediately afterwards, a heavy and dark cloud of ash started spreading toward the lake.
It's been over 20 years since Chicago began to rewrite a chapter of its own story. A story tucked away in the shadows of its famous skyline. Closing an era shrouded in an ambiguous past. One that, if not remembered, will soon be forgotten. This story's legacy, the violence and poverty that plague Chicago's hyper-segregated communities. But what is known about the systems that created them? The laws that isolated them, and the policies that abandoned them? And how does a city heal from decades of heartbreak and loss? At the crossroad of a nation, this is Chicago's story.
3, 2, 1.
Whoa!
72 murders for the month.
3 days, 68 people were shot.
What the hell is going on in Chicago?
That's more people shot in one weekend than wounded in a typical month in battle-torn Iraq.
17305 South Polina, shots fired at the police, male blackjack.
Putting Chicago on pace for 700.
A man was shot live on Facebook last night.
Deadly gun violence is surging in Chicago once again.
After a horrific weekend in Chicago.
More needs to be done.
More than 3,000 people have been shot in Chicago.
Homicide is related to the desperation of young men, and particularly black young men in the United States. And that's what we're seeing in Chicago.
When people think of PTSD as being what happens to people who've been in combat,
The choices are very limited. What I got to lose? My life?
You break down a city, it's like a tale of 2 cities. If you are downtown Chicago, you almost feel untouchable. Then you go south.
You go out to some of the neighborhoods, they just are starved for resources and investment.
That's abandonment. That's just systematic destruction.
It's that pot that's boiling, and stuff can start spilling out, or we can turn the fire down.
You hear people, they present the problem, and they say, yo, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. Okay, you're woke, you know the problem. What is the solution?
Get your presidential t-shirts, guys.
Family of the United States of America.
It's been over a decade since the world's eyes were unmistakably fixed on Grant Park in Chicago. The night the nation elected its first African-American president, Barack Obama. The pride of a city couldn't have been greater. Chicago felt together, in unison with a renewed optimism for the future. especially me. I grew up right around Argyle Gardens, one of Chicago's most desolate public housing projects. Home to toxic landfills and abandoned industrial plants, the Gardens, where Barack Obama began his career as a community organizer. When I was a kid, you couldn't have felt further from the luxury of the Chicago Loop growing up. I was one of the lucky ones who made it out, overcoming the odds to become a spoken word artist and a Grammy-winning producer. I grew up seeing the bloodshed of the gang wars in the 90s. And it was at this moment
America is a place where all things are possible. Change has come to America.
that I thought we had reached a new day for America, for Chicago. But the feeling didn't seem to last forever. By the end of President Obama's second term, the world's eyes were once again focused on Chicago. This time, for all the wrong reasons. Murder was running through Chicago faster than the Chicagoans running from it. Blood was flowing through our streets. What went so wrong in this city to make it the case study for murder and violence? Or is Chicago just a scapegoat for a violent nation and a testament for things to come? Truth be told, Chicago ranks just 9th in murders per capita and 24th for violent crimes. But in the court of public opinion, Chicago is an active war zone. Even as mass shootings multiply and urban violence escalates coast to coast. But for Chicagoans, we recognize the issue. We know it's up to us to fix it because no one else will.
On Monday, we were told we were the deadliest month of August, deadliest month of 20 years. On Tuesday, we were told Chicago has more murders than New York and Los Angeles together.
Saw pictures of people have been killed. One is my son. Right there with the red cap on?
Yeah.
Red shirt, that's my son. That's Jarvis, the one I told you about, so you know.
It has happened again. This latest victim, a 6-year-old girl. Tonight we're learning more about a 6-year-old girl who was shot while playing outside on this hot summer day.
When I turn her head, it's just leaking blood. I just really want us to live in peace.
Sometimes the only way people can cope is just to try not to cope, not even to deal with it, ignore it like it's not happening because it becomes too much. And people are afraid. When a 6-year-old girl from my school says to me, Father Mike, will you pray for me? I said, what am I gonna pray for? She said, that I'm alive at the end of the summer. That a child has to even think like that at 6, they deserve their future. They have a right to grow up.
It's going back. Got a little afro right there.
What do you want to do when you grow up?
A doctor and police.
Oh, so she's gonna have 2 jobs. She's gonna be a police officer and a doctor, huh?
Yep.
You're gonna be making people feel good and taking the crime off the streets at the same time. That's what I'm talking about, my baby. What's our phrase? What you want people to do? What you want these men to do outside?
Put the guns down. Put the guns down.
We gonna fight, shoot, and kill over blocks that have been abandoned and neglected. Some blocks that look like third world countries, and we're gonna fight over a block that other people don't give a damn about? How stupid is that? Instead of banding together and saying, we're gonna be in the real fight and bring some economic development, bring some jobs, bring some hope, bring some possibility back to our community. You can't just say stop the violence. Give me a job, give me a way out, give me an opportunity. This fight is in our hands.
How did it end up like this? So violent. So hopeless for so many. To truly find the answers, we have to go back to the beginning.
Most of the adults were born in rural areas of the South. They came to Chicago looking for a better way of life. They came to the south side of the city because they found that this was a place where Negroes were permitted to live. About all that they brought with them were their hopes and their dreams.
They knew if they could make it to Chicago from Mississippi, from Alabama, from Arkansas, there was work here. Chicago was a gold mine if you lived in the South.
Chicago was the place where people came so they could build their families and build their futures.
And you began to work at the steel mill. People worked at the stockyard.
You could be an accountant in the North. You could work for an insurance company in the North. You could be a policeman in the North.
There was harmony, cohesiveness, and happiness because people fled the South, were looking to the future.
There was finally a light at the end of the tunnel for Southern blacks and a chance to live the American dream of the North. But that light would prove to be nothing more than a mirage.
Sometimes we talk about this era as if it was all wonderful.
Segregation was part of the culture of the North.
The hope I really had when I come here to do better. But after I got you and started work, it looked like to me I did worse.
This is when the city of Chicago, with help from the private industry, real estate and banks, decided, well, we don't want black people living with white people. And that began a host of policies that I call the Jim Crow North.
The agreement was called restrictive covenants.
Black people come from the South, they definitely can't live with us. So where do we live? Pushed to the worst neighborhoods. We're pushed to slums that others have moved out from.
Racism is structured into housing. That is, when people who are from a different background move in large numbers, you just restrict them to certain areas.
We were assigned where to live. On the one hand was the joy of our living together, free of the burdens of the South. The other, we were trapped and could not grow, could not get out.
The concentration of people was 4 times that of adjacent white communities. The Black Belt, and gradually, block by block by block,
the Black Belt just kept bursting by the seams because black people couldn't live anywhere else.
Chicago was really notorious at this time for being a difficult place for African Americans to come and find good, fair housing at decent prices.
I was there and I saw what can happen to human beings if they're excluded from the main source of opportunity.
He couldn't get much worse, because if it did, I wouldn't be living at all.
Chicago is one of the most segregated cities on earth.
You're segregated by class as well as race. And so it's almost tribal.
I find that people of all races seem to think that this is something that just naturally happened. Oh, well, I just live around people who are like me.
I grew up in an all-black community. The only time I ever saw anybody that wasn't black is when I went to go buy food. I had to buy that from the Arabs. If I was being detained by the police, a lot of times it might have been a white officer. But just random white people just in your hood, they was never there. You feel like, man, it has to be some sort of plan or something behind that to make it go down like that. And here we are living in it today.
Most people on the North Side, the reason they don't know anything about the South Side is because they've never been to the South Side, ever. Ever. So it's easy to say, I don't worry about that. That's not in my backyard. You see what's happening on the news. Boy shot, girl shot, kid shot on a playground. And you say to yourself, I have no idea what's going on.
To truly understand the plight of Chicago into the city that you see today, we have to go back again to the city fathers who saw the blighted slums as eyesores instead of communities, and its residents as second-class citizens. Fixing the problem while maintaining segregation would prove to be the point of no return.
Today, the endless plain is gone. We must build a new city on top of the old. Today, we have and have to have a comprehensive plan for the city of Chicago, taking into account the needs of all the people to have a decent place to live.
Public housing starts in the New Deal as a response to the poverty conditions and also slum conditions that existed in many cities. The idea was to clear the slums, build new housing, and this will make better citizens. And this is the kind of government flow of money from Washington that Mayor Richard J. Daley was very interested in bringing to Chicago.
This project represents the future of a great city.
How are we going to do this? Well, it's cheaper to build up. We're going to build up. We build high rises.
Federal government said it's high rises or you get nothing. Everybody took the high rise across the country.
For most of us who are living in ghettos, and moving into the projects was a chance to get stabilized and then to move into the mainstream of American housing and American life.
When folks first moved in public housing, it was the place to be. African Americans will tell you that, veterans will tell you that, and we talk about the 50s, 60s, and the 70s.
I think the buildings are nice, but it's just like taking one big slum and sit it in another slum because nothing has been changed.
So yeah, let's try that again. You wanted it simpler. Public housing failed in Chicago for a few very basic reasons.
They went up in waves across the country. Partnerships between Washington and local housing authorities. The government would pay to build public housing, and a local entity would manage the day-to-day operations and plan the construction. In this case, the Chicago Housing Authority, CHA. Chicago's plan was more ambitious than any in the country. A total of 29 public housing communities would grow up across Chicago in just a few decades. A mix of row houses, mid-rises, and high-rise buildings were scattered. And then there were the monsters. Cabrini Green on the city's north side, concentrating more than 15,000. Whoa! If Cabrini Green was the monster, well then Robert Taylor was the Goliath. 28 16-story buildings located directly on the raised south side slums. One of a cluster of housing projects that spanned nearly 4 miles as far as the eye could see.
So those were 5 different public housing developments in this one corridor concentrated in the heart of the south side of Chicago. That many buildings with that many poor people in one place. It decimated the south side of Chicago.
The city planners had come too far to turn back now. The decisions to maintain segregation in Chicago would come at a price because there were massive holes in their master plan. But nobody said segregation would be easy, beginning with the basic function of paying for the exorbitant upkeep of the buildings themselves. The income to maintain the massive structures relied mostly on a scaled portion of tenant wages, and the bottom would soon fall out of urban industrialization and the funds to operate public housing, much like the jobs that had lured millions from the South, would all disappear too.
It's good and it's through. I'm 33 years old, I've been here 33 years. The heating systems, it's not working.
Girl, this don't make no sense. They should at least have some heat.
Y'all seen the floods in the building, the water, the pipes, them busted and everything like that.
When I moved into public housing, there was rigorous background checks. There were social workers who checked in on you. They no longer did any of that. They simply took people, threw them in. They said, if you want to live in public housing, come on, go in there.
The quality of life was hell on earth. You might go to sleep and it might be roaches crawling from up under your pillow. You may get on the elevator and the elevator smell like urine. You may be outside playing basketball, hooping, and somebody that you just passed the ball to might get shot in the head. I lost a good friend of mine. He was out just shooting jumpers and they came through and shot him 19 times, automatic.
The police always used to say they don't go into Cabrini until the shooting stops. You hear a lot of residents say they feared for their life because of the lack of protection.
Planners made a choice to build housing for large families, families with 5, 6, 7 children.
Originally, there were 7 persons to every unit. When you couple that with female-headed families and average incomes of $5,000,
they didn't think about how many kids they were putting in a building versus the number of adults.
People who were concerned about their children playing were up 16 floors, while their children were 16 floors away. All of a sudden, the children are now creating their own rules for living without the connection to their mothers, their fathers, their uncles, their grandparents. If you could imagine a 16-story building pouring out children, and then the children deciding what they wanted to do, what was good, whether or not they wanted to fight, whether or not they wanted to steal.
You have to put all of this shift in public housing at the feet of public policy.
The government would not pay for a child who had a father living with that child.
Fathers of some children in this building found their families could be helped by the welfare department, but only if they left home or died.
The father leaves, all of a sudden the rent drops. Hey, that's a pretty good deal. It became a financial incentive for the father to move out.
My father could not live with us, and we had social workers come to our homes to find out if there were men's clothes or if we had a new television.
Jane, this is Miss
Stewart.
Glad to meet you, Mrs. Stewart. How are you?
I'm here to help you find a place to move.
What would happen then is that you've got a lot of children now without adult supervision from men.
And the dropout rate in the schools began to increase dramatically. Many of the boys were put out of school and they were in the streets. They terrorized the communities, this community and others.
Across America, public housing is in ruins, called a national disgrace.
Cabrini Green. To some folks, it has become a hell on earth.
Life at Robert Taylor is dominated by welfare, women, and children.
Either CHA is going to manage its real estate, or we should just declare openly that the gangs have control of our property and let them have it.
It's like some bad movie. I mean, is there something that can be done?
Right now, the only organized activity in public housing is the gang and the drug dealer.
Everyone has agreed on one single point. The place has to be changed.
Well, you see, it's poverty-stricken. Basically, you need a lot of jobs over here.
Somehow you always make it full circle right back here.
I would like to see some jobs come to us where we all can make money, get off aid, and just live like we want to live. Because see, right now we all struggling. We're struggling for money, food, and everything else.
5 years from now? I'm gonna tell you, I don't really know. Hope to still be living.
Reports from Chicago, where the U.S. government has just seized control of the local public housing authority.
Today's takeover in Chicago makes the federal government landlord of America's poorest, most crime-infested public housing projects.
In the end, these high-rise public housing developments were awful places to live. By any measure, high-rise public housing development should have been closed for housing code violations like any other slum building in the city. By the late 1990s, everybody realized this had been a mistake.
In big cities across America, the consensus is public housing doesn't work. And in Chicago, it's coming down. Chicago will destroy more public housing than any city in the country. The debate over what should replace them and who should live there has been fierce.
Maybe the thing that was most detrimental to this city was the federal government and the Chicago Housing Authority pouring folks out that they didn't prepare, that they had for generations.
Hundreds of gunshots are reported, more than a dozen killings in one weekend. Many of the victims are teenagers. New gang wars are breaking out in Chicago, and as the homicide rate is at a near record high.
Frustration over conditions in Chicago Housing Authority developments has reached a new high in Chicago.
Go, get out of here.
An upsurge in violence and the debate over how to combat it brought the Secretary of Housing to Chicago. After indicting Robert Taylor Holmes, he called conditions deplorable.
American women and children are living in a setting that is violent and demeaning and fearsome and introduces their children to a world without hope.
What those conditions meant, said the mayor, is that public housing in Chicago has failed.
The bottom line is that high-rise public housing does not work. Isolating, as pointed out, low-income people in 10 or 20-story concrete boxes has failed.
So CHA Chairman Vince Lane pressed the Cisneros for a loan of $1 billion to do what Lane says may be the only thing left to do.
Totally change public housing as we now know it.
There's a failure of the city, a failure of the housing authority, a failure of the federal government in Washington to allow conditions to spiral down to that level.
Once you withdrew maintenance, it was only a matter of time.
For years, community activists at Cabrini Green have been saying the city's ultimate plan was to move them out of these buildings and off this land because Cabrini is only minutes from downtown Chicago, making the land very valuable.
Public housing was located on some of the most desirable land in the city, the most valuable land.
Do CHA residents really want to move?
And so the people who lived in public housing said, we just want to stay here.
It's the American dream, a little house in the suburbs with a picket fence.
The American dream for me is to be left alone.
If you could live anywhere you wanted to, where would you live?
I stay over here. I've been raised up over here all my life. I'm comfortable over here.
We just prepared for the worst right now,
Okay. And it went down fast. Cities had erased high-rise public housing from their city plan.
The entire area will be transformed into a middle-class, white, yuppie-style community. That's what is happening. That land is worth $1 billion if it's cleared.
There's a conspiracy theory that what's really going to happen is that everyone's going to be squeezed out. They will make way for the big buck developers. Is that going to happen?
No, it won't happen. And I'm committed to make sure that public housing residents are not displaced from their communities.
It's very difficult to maintain peace and tranquility in the midst of confusion.
Because you wear a badge. They don't love you and they never will.
If we leave here, where are we going to go? If we leave here, where are we going to live?
There were 30,000 families living in public housing. Where were people going to go? Was there going to be a revolt? Could this be pulled off?
My primary concern is where's the next generation going to live? You think they're thinking about the American dream? What is the American dream these days?
The infamous era of high-rise public housing in Chicago and most of the country was over. A testament to public policy gone wrong, a failure on all levels of government. The design was flawed, the vision was short-sighted, the empathy was lost. But the root motivation of these massive warehouses for the poor was much more sinister.
When there were too many black people, they said, what are we going to do? Well, let's build these high-rises, but we can't put them in the white areas. Let's rip down houses in the black community and house people within those neighborhoods. And all of those projects, with the exception of Cabrini, were built in all-black neighborhoods, and Cabrini then became an all-black neighborhood.
The reason that high-rise public housing was built in Chicago was an attempt by the city government to constrain the black population of the city in the smallest geographic area.
That's not a recipe for success. That's a blueprint for disaster.
It was too late. Those buildings were destined to go.
It's now been 2 decades since the first brick fell from the mortar of Chicago public housing. What followed was known as the Plan for Transformation.
Now we find ourselves in the 21st century. There's a whole lot of people in the United States who need stable housing that's affordable. Even the city of Chicago's estimates is that there's a lack of about 120,000 units of affordable housing.
Now you have taken away the housing, but you don't have anything to replace it. Instead, you have condominiums that are costing $1,800 for 1 bedroom and $2,000 for 2 bedrooms.
There are some neighborhoods in Chicago that are becoming unaffordable because rents are too high, but there are some neighborhoods in Chicago that are unaffordable because people don't make enough money.
Communities that are poor, people that are poor, are getting pushed into a smaller and smaller box as gentrification takes up more and more space.
And we sort of gave up on conventional public housing. We decided that a whole lot of public purposes should be privatized, infusing it with incentivizing the profit motive. In the public housing realm, we decided to turn it over to private developers. So the Section 8 programs came into existence. Tenants have vouchers where they can take those vouchers and have the rental assistants follow them to whatever landlord in whatever building they live in, which is an experiment.
The buildings are all gone. Only a memory transfixed in the minds of the former tenants, as if you could still feel the rubble drifting in the wind. What was promised was new mixed-income communities, though only a fraction of former public housing residents were actually allowed to move back into the new communities. Most were never built, leaving vast expanses of land just vacant.
A lot of places have not even started construction yet. They've still have been empty for more than a decade. That was the centerpiece of the Plan for Transformation. Overall, where did people go? That's the big question.
Life has a way of just moving on. But for some former residents, It feels like it was just yesterday.
I think about snowball stands on the corner. I think about basketball tournaments. I think about fun days. And no matter where I went in the world for however long, I could come back home. It's heartbreaking. A lot of us are running around lost, trying to figure out who we are and where we come from, because we can't take our kids and be like, that's where you come from. The building I was brought to from the hospital is the one over there on the other side of the park. Like, you can see it. Can you see it? Playground, and still this little area right here. And then you come up on the tree. Okay, I guess it's like in my DNA to flock back. I'm not trying to downplay the violence. It was very violent. Some people came out shell-shocked. PTSD and all of that. This was a war zone. But at the same time, it was a paradise. I ride past here often. I say to myself, man, I miss the Iggy's. I know a lot of people that were just put out. We don't care, you need to go, bye. If someone can just come in and snatch your whole world and livelihood from you, then what are you, you know? I'm Lyntessa Williams, former resident of the Harold Ickey Homes.
Public housing had become so problematic in Chicago that many people just wanted it to go away. And in fact, that's what's happened.
But what happened is that the buildings came down at a much faster pace than anything that was being rebuilt. What we have found is that most displaced public housing residents have lived on a Section 8 voucher.
A Section 8 voucher says you, the tenant, can go find an apartment in a private housing market, and we, the federal government, will help pay your rent.
And those vouchers have placed them in racially and economically segregated communities on the south and west sides.
It meant you're going to a community that will accept your $800 a month voucher. That's what it meant. Now, no one said that.
A lot of people don't get it unless it's broken down. But what you've done is you've recreated the concentration of poor people in particular buildings and sometimes whole blocks.
There was a cleansing happening. It was called internal displacement from one impoverished neighborhood to another one. It was a plan for resegregation if you look at where people ended up.
Almost all the residents were forced into 9 or 10 communities. The communities were under siege at that point.
These young guys, right? He's 15 years old. His father in jail, his grandfather in jail. His mother on the street. He the oldest. He got a sister, 13 years old. He got a little brother, 8 years old. Now he a man. He just got out of 8th grade 2 years ago. So he got to take care of family. The choices are very limited.
The drug trade is probably one of the largest employers on the west side, and I did that calculation of number of people who've been arrested and prosecuted for dealing drugs out there and then comparing that with employment numbers.
What I got to lose? My life? I mean, that's the best thing happened for me. I can get away from it.
Is it any surprise that open-air drug markets are such a large employer? No. Much of it hasn't been rebuilt since the riots in 1968 when Martin Luther King was killed.
They're just wastelands.
We from the gutterest parts of the city, from the most impoverished parts of the city, so you can't put that on no job resume. We can't say, oh yeah, I trapped the block for 10 years and this is why you should hire me. The only thing that's left to do is to hustle, sell a drug, sell a bag.
Drug commerce in Chicago is a very violent business.
And it's settled not with writs and subpoenas, it's settled with guns. I think the murders in Chicago are mostly due to the drug trades in Chicago.
Just came from a funeral, man, and it wasn't good. Wasn't nothing good about it at all. It's like I'm almost immune to it a little bit, but then it make you think about like how your funeral gonna be, what's gonna happen when you die.
The realities on these blocks can be all too harsh for the young men and boys who congregate on the corners and stoops of two flats and old brownstones, left with few options in a seemingly hopeless existence.
You have to take the time to really find a community that will accept you as a Section 8 recipient with a voucher. I ended up down here at Garfield Park. A lot of times you end up in a community like this. You're gonna see drug dealings every day. You're gonna hear shootings. It's not like you're living in Beverly Hills, you know. At the same time, what can we do? I have 2 boys, 2 girls. My oldest son, his name is Edwin Dorsey.
Growing up, it's always tough in Chicago, you know. Everybody, all these murders happen, everybody down, you know. So it's a lot of killings around here, so it's really a crazy neighborhood. Kids getting shot every day, so you get accustomed to it, you know. Any altercation could pop off. It could start from something little, then escalate to so big, and then all kids think in their mind is, go get a gun, you know.
One of the things about these guys that I found very unique is that the brotherhood and the family environment that they have, that they try to create amongst themselves. They got 1 or 2 houses that they can take all the guys in, and they kind of all chip in together, where they all kind of put their money together. They're like, we're all that we have.
Absolutely, I worry. I mean, it's a chance that they take every time they go outside. We living in a really bad environment where we just need to really change our ways.
Some kids may turn to the streets, you know, try to hustle. Yeah, the money fast, but it's always gonna find a way to catch up with you. You don't know that your enemy right around the corner watching you from the whole situation. You don't know that the police watching too. It's always different circumstances, you know, so keep your head up. Always just second think everything. You gotta watch your back every day. It's the most dangerous job in America.
Does anybody ever sit down and ask them, like, what do you want to do? I'm pretty sure selling drugs is not gonna be the first thing out of their mouth. They're just getting money with that. That's not their passion. Somebody's gotta be there to say, hey, you can do this. Let me show you this over here. And then you gotta wanna do it. You gotta wanna do it.
He has a lot of potential in a job or something opposed to just selling drugs out here and just being caught up in, you know, in this vicious, nasty world that we're living in.
They love money too much and don't know how to let it come to him instead of him gotta go and get it all the time. He think I'm always trying to be his mama when really I'm just being his girlfriend. He don't want to listen. Each time I tell him, he get in trouble right after I had to tell him.
I got a son. I just want to provide from him, so it was just always hard. It's just getting your mind focused. Got to keep your mind straight and what you want to do in life. If you think you could do it, you probably could do it.
Is it tough to live in the city right now?
Yeah, it is. It's tough, and when King get older, I'm trying to move out before he get 5. Move out of Chicago, out of Illinois, period. Too many people getting taken out this world for no reason. Nowhere to raise my son at.
You don't want to just wake up to hearing your best friend getting shot on the news, you know. You don't want to wake up to that every day.
Have you had friends get killed?
Yeah, one of my friends, yeah, recent, just about a month ago. Yeah. Some people get away with some things, some people go to jail. For every action is reaction. So it's consequences to everything. So you never know, never really know.
Edwin is at a critical age, no longer in school and left with few options to provide for his young family. The days can be long in these Chicago streets. Edwin has reached his crossroad. Which way will he go?
I've seen a variety of reasons as to why some kids turn to the streets to sell drugs. It can be as simple as feeding themselves. When you're 14, 15 years old, it's hard to get a job, so this tends to be the fastest, easiest way to get money. A lot of times it's the younger guys who are the ones selling the drugs on the street because the consequences are lower for juveniles. A lot changes when you're convicted of a felony. We call these, I guess, in the legal world, the collateral consequences of felony conviction.
7393, boy.
It's really hard to see one of my 17-year-olds get arrested as a young 18-year-old and seeing how their lives have changed and how great the consequences can be for adult cases. I met Edwin about a year ago in custody at the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. He was really at risk the whole time of being committed to the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice. We always try to prevent incarceration. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. The judge in Edwin's situation was unwilling to give him that third or fourth chance, basically.
Edwin was charged with possession with the intent to distribute narcotics and sentenced to 6 months in a juvenile detention center. He now faces an all too common reality. As a black man in America, there's nearly an 80% chance that he will return to prison within 5 years after being involved in the federal justice system.
It feels good to be back. You happy to be out, running these streets.
Feel great, you know. Waiting a little long time, but it's finally here.
You see the baby?
Yeah, happy to see the sun, man. I ain't seen them in a minute. Hey! Hello, man. Miss Daddy. Hey. You miss your daddy? Daddy miss you. You wanna go to the store?
He's an adult now, so he gotta carry and conduct himself as an adult. I mean, he gotta be a role model to his son at the end of the day. I can't be. My son was guilty of the crimes that he committed. He did his time. I won't judge him. That's part of the past. I strongly believe you gotta stand behind your children. Just don't turn your back on them, before it's too late. Unfortunately, these younger guys are the ones that are losing their lives. I just want him to take the time, become a father the way that he's supposed to be towards his son, and just become a respectful man in society.
I've seen it happen many times. Somebody just come home out of jail, been gone for a couple months or so, come out. It's the circumstances they still in, they still around the same place with the bad negativity, so kinda drags them back into it, They don't got that many opportunities. They got felonies on their background, so trying to do something productive, but end up, going back towards down the wrong road. You ain't gonna achieve what you wanna achieve by tomorrow. There's always gonna be distractions. So you just gotta be focused on everything you wanna do. You got a dream, just chase it. Your life doesn't end there.
We're working with guys aged 17 to 25, guys who've been on the street, dropped out of high school, maybe didn't even finish 8th grade, the ones who have records, the ones who nobody wanted. Every other program kicked them out. These are the ones that we're going after because these are the ones that are causing the most ruckus.
Our objective is high school diploma, no new cases, clean drops, a marketable skill. In other words, a new identity. They didn't come to us with 5 minutes worth of trauma. They come to us with 18, 21, 25 years worth of trauma. And they've navigated that trauma the best way they could figure out. So our desire is to say, yo, you count. We see you, you're significant.
We really want them to kind of get unplugged from the streets, and we want to be able to have them get plugged in with a life coach and kind of start to work on doing something different with their life.
I tell them when we first talk to them, you suck as a criminal. You suck as a criminal. Let me just let you know now. That's why you're on parole or probation. That's not perhaps maybe the design you're created to be. Maybe you're designed to start a business. Maybe you're supposed to run this firehouse.
It's not about bringing a kid to a program and being with them for a couple of hours and then sending them back out, but really walking life with them, being in their life to help transform their life.
The language of success, that is preparation meets opportunity, determination, and have a plan.
You can kind of have an approach of that these guys have had all these hard times in the past. What I've found is that the guys have an incredible hunger to get ahead. I've seen guys go through drug treatment programs and then get union jobs. I've seen guys get their high school diploma at an age when they thought that was completely beyond them and it was never going to happen for them. It's just an incredible experience when you get to be part of a guy doing something for themselves.
Well, I was thinking like, damn, I can't be doing the same thing to put me in the same position that I'm in already. Some had to give, some had to change.
I can't help to think about this quote right here, man. Go out and do something great with your day.
Came across this program and then that was looking bright for me.
We believe in you, man. That's what we want you to do. We want you to succeed in whatever you want to do, all right? Go out, man, and do something great with your day.
Just like to learn new things, trying to, just learning new things, learning new ways, and just applying them to the real world. There's a lot of stuff that people out here need, such as job training, getting my education through the programs, helps you deal with emotional stress, therapy. Very much thankful. It's a blessing, you know. Decent blessing, yeah. Can't complain.
You know, the guys say to us, you guys are the only men who are with us who don't want nothing from us. Nobody believes that anybody gives a fuck about them, so I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. Because I walked right by you and you knew I needed some help and you didn't do anything. You saw a situation and you didn't come through. The community is tired. I mean, we got elders who say, I stay in my house in the summertime. I am not coming outside because guys are shooting up and down the block, not with some BB guns, with some AK-47s, 50-round clips. So I'm not coming outside. I'm not going to be the village. We believe in journeying with you. We're going to journey with you. We'll love you until you can love yourself. You now begin to wear down what was done in the village to you, with the school, with the teacher, with family, with the police.
There's a small number of guys who are actually keeping up the drama, is actually keeping up the violence. And if we can tap into those guys and show them other options and really help them, that's gonna begin to turn the relationship and begin to change the dynamics of how this young man thinks and how he views life.
If you got up and went to the lakefront and watched the sun come up, now the day is yours. That's rare. You're a different dude.
I'm gonna stay focused because I know what I want to do. If you make a wrong decision, there's gonna be a consequence to that action. So I learned that younger. I'm 19, but I learned that at a young age. I learned that at 16, 17. Every action is a reaction, so it's up to you to do it the right thing. I was really supposed to graduate last year, but I made it this year. As long as I get that diploma, and it's something that nobody can never take away from me, so happy that I'm getting it. For the homies who died, I know they watching down on me, knowing I'm doing the right thing, and it's happy for me, but I mean, homies in jail, I know that they could, hopefully they get a chance, you know, get an opportunity like I got, and get their life on track. Everything works out for the best.
This drug dealing life, the consequences will be either you end up in jail or you'll be dead. And it's sad because these are young kids that are dying. But then again, I'm thankful because you gotta go through something in order to come out. And my son has went through a whole lot, and he's finally coming out of it.
Graduation is going to be alphabetical order. So folks are going to be in alphabetical order. So it's a whole group of everybody else from other cohorts all together.
Graduation. I felt successful at that moment, being able to give my mama something that a lot of my family members didn't have. Very proud of myself, very proud.
It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Chicago Red second graduation. Make some noise!
And so for all the challenges we face, for all the pain we sometimes feel, I am wildly optimistic about where our city is going to go. Only thing I'm going to ask is you reach back and bring 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 with you. If we do that, the numbers of this start to turn the city in a very different way in a short amount of time. So congratulations, I couldn't be more proud of you. One step a long journey. You guys make me proud every single day.
You know, I come from poverty, but the road is brighter, so I know I got some potential to do a lot of good things now.
I would just add that potential's always been there. It's just having a chance to sort of rise to the surface. And he's not a different person. He has a good heart. All of our guys have good hearts. They just maybe haven't had the chances, the opportunities to support, and honestly the love. And there's a lot of love in a room like this, and people who believe deeply in what he can accomplish, not just today, but for the next 10 years for the West Side, but also for the city. All right, so proud, so proud. Great job. How you feel? You straight?
Yeah, good.
Edwin Dorsey.
I've always told them the sky is the limit. You just gotta have the willingness, the effort, and the faith. And believe in yourself. Ain't nobody gonna do it for you. And hopefully this is just the beginning to a great future.
It's rooms like this that have led the way in reducing Chicago's spiraling murder rate in recent years, with investment into the communities that need it most, by leaders within these communities. But more needs to be done to combat Chicago's stark poverty and violence epidemic. Edwin's story embodies the struggle for so many young Black men in Chicago, as cities across America today, at the crossroad of success and failure, life and death. It's a city that rose from the ashes to become a global city, once called the city of the century, the city of broad shoulders. So why not here? Why not now? To mobilize a sustainable and equitable city for all, perhaps serving as a model for others to follow. But the biggest questions still remain. Where will people live? Where will they work? And what kind of city will future generations inherit? Because Chicago's story is the American story, written by those searching for a better way of life, and understanding how we got here may be the only path forward.